Welcome to Experiments in Leadership, practical insights for Caribbean business leaders. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Cyber Resilience for Caribbean Leaders. I'm your host, Anthony Subero. In episode 6, we spoke about managing third-party cybersecurity risk through the contract management life cycle. And if you recall, we offered clear insights as to how we can manage these risks through 3 specific tracks. In track 1, we recommended that cybersecurity prerequisites must exist in the selection process of a vendor. In track 2, we offer the relevant cybersecurity clauses that must be covered in the contract. And in track 3, we suggested how these clauses must be enforced in the life of the contract. Today, we will be expanding the vendor selection conversation by discussing how do we outsource cybersecurity the right way by knowing exactly what to keep in-house versus what to outsource, and how do we go about selecting the right service provider for your organization. Now, the knowledge we wish to share relevant to this topic is somewhat lengthy. So to ensure we optimize your time, we're going to cover this episode in 2 parts. In the first part, we will cover the benefits of outsourcing and 5 recommendations and selecting the right provider for your organization. And in the second part, we will close off with what cybersecurity components that must be kept in-house and what can be outsourced. So what you're going to have is you're going to have 2 podcasts that will cover the same topic, okay? So let's move into the benefits of outsourcing. Now, there are many reasons we outsource. Firstly, most Caribbean, or I would even suggest small, medium businesses globally, are operating with small or overstretched internal teams, very limited security budgets, and of course, you have increasing digital adoption, and of course, in some cases, increasing regulatory and customer expectations. On top of that, you also have an increase in cyber attacks, not only in terms of volume and frequency, but in terms of complexity. So, given these 2 critical business dynamics, as business leaders, we must be constantly assessing how do we defend our organization realistically. And it involves optimizing the organizational resources that we have within the context of both human and financial capital. So for most Caribbean organizations, to manage the risk in relation to cyber security, it's really difficult to build a complete security operations in-house. One is just not practical in relation to cost, but it's also not practical in relation to the skill sets that you need. And this is why, most organizations look at outsourcing, because outsourcing provides access to skills that you will be hard to hire locally. It offers 24/7 monitoring that small internal teams just cannot manage because of the cost and the skill sets, as I mentioned earlier. But to me, the greatest benefit of outsourcing cybersecurity is that the cybersecurity provider comes with global and regional experience in cyber attack incidents that your internal team will never have that experience, right? Unless they got attacked, all right? But these are particular attacks and incidents that your organization must be prepared to manage. Therefore, outsourcing offers many opportunities to organizations to purchase these benefits while optimizing the limited resources that you have. Now, there's a caveat here when it comes to outsourcing. And why I'm bringing this up is that I've sat in many meetings as an executive and as a board member when recommendations are being made, and you hear the presenter say, "Now, this is a service we're going to fully outsource." Business leaders, there is nothing like 100% outsourcing. When you outsource without keeping a close eye on what that service provider is doing, most of the times you're going to be creating more problems than solutions. You need to manage your service provider as you would with any critical resource within your organization. All right, so remember that there's nothing like 100% outsourcing. Once you decide to select a vendor, that vendor has to be effectively managed by a resource within your organization. Okay, so now that we've covered the benefits of outsourcing, let's take a look at what are the recommendations, or what do you look for a service provider. And we're offering to you 5 recommendations that should be considered when choosing a provider. Number 1, business alignment before technology. The right provider must talk about business risk and not just about security tools and services. To me, they should ask questions like, how is cyber resilience linked to your business strategy? What systems present the highest impact to your organization by way of revenue, operations, and I would even add reputation? What data creates regulatory or reputational exposure to you as an organization? And what downtime is unacceptable as it relates to your operations and, of course, your business service delivery? If a provider leads with fancy dashboards, statistics, and acronyms before trying to understand your business, I would suggest that's a warning sign. Business leaders, remember, cybersecurity exists to protect business outcomes and not about selling impressive tools and technology. All right. Recommendation 2, they must have proven experience in the Caribbean and with companies in your industry. Why? Well, context matters. Look for providers who worked with companies similar to yours, not only from a horizontal perspective, but also the cybersecurity level of your organization and the objectives you try to achieve with regards to short and long-term strategies. They must be able to appreciate the Caribbean operating realities and culture. And this must not only come from the consultants or the experts that your team will be interacting with, but also at the leadership level. They must have real incident response experience with what I call a continuous learning discipline. And let me expand a bit about this. And I do this even to some of the service providers that we interacted. I ask this question: tell me about a certain incident, in this case it will be a data breach, you or your team helped contain, and what did you learn from it? If they cannot easily and clearly address that question, that to me is a red flag as it relates to their internal development process. Recommendation 3, understand the clear scope, roles, and measurable outcomes. Try to avoid vague terms like comprehensive protection and AI innovative technologies and processes. You need to understand exactly what those terms mean, right? In your interaction with the provider, you must be able to clearly understand what are the clear measurable objectives within what they are required to deliver, what is being monitored and what's not, as in the case of a 24/7 monitoring service. What triggers response? Who acts first and how fast? And what does the leadership reports look like? Is it very technical centric or is it business decision enabling? Remember, if accountability is not clearly defined and measurable, then the risks are hidden and not being effectively managed. Recommendation 4, strengthen identity, monitoring, and incident response and data protection. These days, hackers do not need to force their way into the system. Also, they don't need to force their way into the service provider systems. They can simply use compromised login credentials to gain access. So your provider must be strong in identity and access security, continuous monitoring and detection, incident response and containment, and of course, data protection. So ask these questions. How will you be protecting my data? How do you detect stolen credentials? How do you contain lateral movement? So lateral movement is when the attacker gets into your system, he or she has the capacity to move across the entire network, all right, in search for information that they want to encrypt and use. And then what happens in the first hour of an incident? Our experience and our research has shown is that the first hour, from the point in time you have identified an attack, your ability to quickly implement your incident response plan can in fact determine the significance and the impact of that attack. All right. And then recommendation 5, Your vendor must have a partnership mindset and not focus on a transaction. Remember, this is a journey and your success is their success. Your providers should establish increasing leadership visibility. That is, their CEO or senior executive team members must be accessible to you. If an incident occurs and you're not happy with the service, you must have the ability to pick up the phone, call that CEO and say, boss, you need to get your act together. I'm really disappointed in the way you guys are responding to my specific need. Your provider must also help you improve your cyber resilience decision making. A lot of companies say we want to be a trusted advisor. That's where the true value comes in. How do they help you in making the right decisions to leverage and ensure a return on security investment? And the third one is a security provider must strengthen your internal capability over time, not only through reliable support, but the knowledge transfer. So their people must be interacting with your people, and your people would in fact mature based on that experience. Okay? Remember, the right provider focuses more on the relationship than a transaction. Equally important, cyber resilience is a team sport that requires collective leadership and effective support through what I call a trust dynamic. Your cybersecurity service provider must always be comfortable in their space and grow with you towards your cyber resilience objective. All right. So I want to end this episode, which is part 1 at this point. Remember, as I said, there's a second part to this topic, which we will discuss which cybersecurity components you must keep in-house and what you can effectively outsource. Okay. So thank you so much for staying some time with us. All right. As we work together in improving your organization's cyber resilience. I'm Anthony Subero. Until next time, please keep well. Hi, if this episode brought any value to you, we kindly ask you to share it with others. If you need help on your cyber resilience journey, you can find us on www.stratos-cyber.com. Until we meet again, keep well.